crime files of Los Angeles digs into the old criminal files to review what were the true facts of some of the most interesting and sensational cases of all times. Here we go behind the scenes to review what the detectives did in the investigation, how they tracked down the criminals. Further, we examine the jury trial to see what evidence was presented to the jury. And in the end, we reveal the results of the case as well as what happened to all of those various characters in the case. So let's get started today on the case that we've selected to examine. What were the facts? Today's talk is the murder of Ennis Cosby. Well, it's better known as the Mikhail Markhasev case, the name of the defendant. Who was Ennis Cosby? Well, he was born into a very famous family. His mother, Camille, and father, Bill Cosby, who was in the entertainment business. Now, he grew up on the East Coast, back in the Pennsylvania area, and he had difficulty in school. He was dyslexic, and he couldn't read, he couldn't write, he was having great difficulty, and schooling was a struggle for him. And he hung in there. He tried very hard, and he was able to accomplish. He graduated from Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. And he was so proud of the fact that he graduated college, and he wanted to do something with his life to help other people, other young people who might have similar learning disabilities. So he decided to go on to graduate school, and he got enrolled at Columbia University, and that's where he was taking classes in education. Now, we direct our attention to January 16, 1997. About 1:15 in the morning, Ennis Cosby is shot dead on a street next to his car. Well, what's this all about? Well, the LAPD detectives were called out to do an investigation, and they're starting to look for evidence, what evidence there is. What happened? Why did this happen? And they noticed that the car was up on a car jack, as though somebody was trying to change a tire. And when they looked in the trunk, they found the spare tire, and you can see there, it's sliced, it's cut, it had blown out. So he was in the process of changing the tire. There's the lug wrench, and you can see from his hands, he was actually doing the removal of the tire and putting on the spare tire. Well, was it a robbery? Well, it didn't have the earmarkings of robbery. His Rolex watch was still on. His wallet was there. Nothing had been taken from the car. And as a matter of fact, the keys to the Mercedes, very expensive convertible, is still in his pocket. So it doesn't have the earmarkings of a robbery. Well, now, what was Ennis Cosby doing in Los Angeles since he was at Columbia University? Well, he came out here on the winter break. His folks had a house in Brentwood. They generally lived in New York, but when they were in Los Angeles, they would stay at this Brentwood house. And he was staying there for a week during the winter break. And he was, spending time with his old buddies. And in his bedroom upstairs, you can see this note. There was a note on the dresser, and it's to a Stephanie, and it has a phone number there. And that's what happened, was that he was trying to meet this woman by the name of Stephanie. She lived in the Hollywood Hills, and he'd called her up. He had met her about a week before, and he was going to see her somewhere between 1 o'clock and 1:30. So that was where he was on his way. In order to get there, he had to go up the 405 freeway. It's an incline over the hill, and he's going up, and the car is not responding. It's acting strange, and he thinks, well, maybe I've got a flat tire. Maybe something's wrong. So he looks for a place to pull over, and he sees the first off-ramp is Scribble Center Drive. So he eases his way over to the right, and he pulls into the off-ramp, and there's a signal there. And you can see what he does is where this arrow is, he comes in and he makes a left-hand turn, trying to find a place that's safe to pull over where he can check on the tires. Now, in our story, we're going to be talking about these two payphones here. They become very significant in the case. Now, he's going down this road, Scribble Center Drive, looking for a safe place. He pulls over, and the first thing he does, he calls Stephanie on his cell phone. And he explains to her, I'm going to be late because I got a flat tire, I think. And she says, okay, I'll come out and I'll help you. So she leaves in her Jaguar. She lives up in the Hollywood Hills, not too far away. So while he's waiting, he's trying to fix the tire, a car comes by. And there are three individuals in the car. And they ask him if, everything's okay, if he needs help. And he yells back at them, no, everything's cool. And they, okay. And then they drive off. So that was the first encounter that he had. And it wasn't until, it might have been 10 minutes, it might even have been 15 minutes, that Stephanie arrived. She comes up from behind with the headlights of her car directed on Ennis' car, making it much easier for him to change the tire. So she's seated in the car there, and it's kind of cold, so she has the windows up, just sitting there with the headlights on, and a person comes up and knocks on her window with a gun and, yells at her, get out of the car or I'll shoot. That scared her, petrified her. She didn't know how to react. She locked the doors and then she just drove off. So Stephanie is gone, and then this individual then goes over and approaches, and as he's standing there, trying to pull the tire off and change it. So for whatever reason, the person attempted to rob him, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, shoots Ennis, and he falls right next to the driver's door of his car. So what happens next is that Stephanie had gone up to Mulholland Drive, turned around, came back, within, let's say 2 minutes, very short period of time, and she has her headlights on, and she can see this person standing next to where Ennis has fallen, and that person takes off running, runs over and gets in another car down by the parking lot and leaves. So that's what happened at that crime scene. And when it was known that it was Ennis Cosby, Bill Cosby's son, the news media they wanted to know, who's been arrested, who are the suspects. It was, so much interest in this case. And the police, they were trying to figure out, okay, who could have done it. And they had Stephanie go in and meet with a forensic artist. And this was the sketch that they came up with. And the description, a young white male with a knit cap. So that's all they had to go on at the beginning. But the pressures on LAPD, to find a suspect. What's going on? Well, the chief of police was Willie Williams, and he was trying to get the robbery homicide to do everything they possibly can. He would have news conferences indicating, pointing to the sketch, and, if anybody knows, seen this person, let us know. But there's no break in the case. There are no suspects that were being uncovered. The pressure just is immense, and it's not just in Los Angeles, it's in Sacramento as well. The governor of California, Gray Davis, he offers a $50,000 reward. But then there was great controversy. How can you give taxpayers money to somebody giving information about a killer? So that was withdrawn. So now there's no real incentive for a person to come forth. However, it was interesting. The National Enquirer, on their own, offered a $100,000 reward for any information as to Ennis Cosby's death and the conviction of the perpetrator. Was that going to get somebody to come forward? Yes, it did. There was a person by the name of Chris. He wanted that $100,000, and he came forth and he said, yeah, I drove Markhasev to a wooded area near Sherman Oaks to look for a murder weapon. Well, that information was given to LAPD so they could start their investigation to check this out. And he continues to tell LAPD, yeah, I met this guy through a friend of a friend. His name was Mikhail Markhasev. And he said he'd jacked this black dude who wasn't moving fast enough for him, and he shot him. He said it was all over television. So, he's explaining this to the officers, and then he goes on, he says, then Markhasev, he explained to me what happened is that after the shooting, he had to get rid of the gun, and he was looking for a place to hide the gun, and he knew about a place in Coldwater Canyon, and that's where he went over, and with his knit cap, he buried that gun in this little, it's kind of like a park area. It's next to a flood control channel. And afterwards, he says that they went over to a friend's house. It most likely is, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, and they, sit around watching television to the early morning hour, and then they learn that the person who had been shot was Ennis Cosby, the son of the comedian Bill Cosby. So this really petrified Markhasev, and he explains to this Chris, I knew I had to get that gun out of there. I needed, somebody who was going to find that gun and it'd be traced back. So several days later, on January 18th, he tells this Chris, okay, let's go find that gun. And they looked all over, and they couldn't find the gun. There was nowhere to be found. Everywhere they looked, there was no gun. So Markhasev is very, very concerned now that they can't recover that gun. But this Chris tells the police, I'm telling you, I went out there and we looked, couldn't find. They said, okay, take us out there, take us out there. So he took LAPD out to the location at Coldwater Canyon and Mulholland Drive, so they could themselves look for that gun. Well, they couldn't find the gun. They couldn't find anything. They looked everywhere. So they called the academy, the police academy, and said, okay, send us all your cadets out. So they had a bus, and they brought all these cadets out, and they marched through there, that entire little park area, and one of the cadets kind of stumbled over something, and there was a rock there, and they called the detectives in. The detectives went over to check what it was, and under the leaves, they found a watch cap. A watch cap, and when they uncovered the watch cap, there was a gun. There was the revolver that, so it said, that was buried there by Markhasev. So the next thing to do was take that gun and check it out ballistically. They took the slug that was recovered from Ennis Cosby, and they compared it up. And it was a match. It was a perfect match. So now we know that this is the gun that was used, and as a result of that, Markhasev is arrested. So who is this Mikhail Markhasev? Well, he came to the States from the Ukraine with his mother back in 1989. I think he was like 11 years old. And he's trying to settle in Los Alamitos, which is just north of Long Beach. Doesn't really fit in very well. And he kind of hooks up with a Hispanic gang. And he wants to be a member, and they accept him. And this was a gang that he was a member of. He didn't speak Spanish, but he tried to fit in, and he tried to learn about guns, shooting guns, and he would go out for target practice. Now, LAPD decided to have a lineup. They have Stephanie come down to the lineup, They have all these people lined up there, and they have Markhasev in the lineup, and they ask her, can you identify any of these people as the person that you saw next to you with the gun, and the person that you saw run away from Ennis? And she said, no, I can't identify. I cannot identify any of those. I don't know who it was. Now, if she was able to identify Markhasev, and that would have been direct evidence, it would have made for a very easy case for the prosecution. Now, the only witness to the crime is not able to identify Markhasev, so the prosecution is going to have to use circumstantial evidence to tie him in. Now, what evidence did they have for trial? Well, when they examined that knit cap, they found a hair in it, and they checked it out, the DNA on the hair, and it came back to Markhasev. So that is a crucial piece of evidence. Now, another thing was, while Markhasev is in custody, he writes a letter to one of his homies, and he says, the crime happened in Bel Air, a robbery gone bad. Bel Air is where it was on Scribble Center Drive. And then he signs it, Pee-wee, and that was his moniker. So now we have a letter that he is sending out indicating that it was a robbery or an attempt robbery that had gone bad. Also, phone calls from those pay phones right there in Scribble Center Drive. We know that Ennis made the call that he had pulled over. He called Stephanie at 1 o'clock, and Stephanie eventually called 911 when she came back and saw, Ennis lying there. So that is the time gap between 1 and 1:24. What we do know is a phone call was made from this payphone at 1:14 and 1:15 to a friend of Markhasev. In other words, we can infer that Markhasev used these payphones to call his friend between the time Ennis Cosby was there trying to change the flat tire. There were other phone calls that were made to his mother through a pager. All of this connected him, his whereabouts. And in the prosecution of the case, this is what was used to show to the jury all the phone calls, all the pages that were made to Markhasev and to Markhasev's mother, and all of the incidents in which he had to try to find somebody to help him find the gun. So that was the timeline that was used and shown to the jury. Now, as far as preparing the evidence for trial, I was involved in helping getting all the things lined up, and these were the exhibits that we prepared for the trial. And we did it downtown Los Angeles. However, the trial was taking place in Santa Monica Courthouse, and that's about maybe 15 miles to the west. So it was being tried in Judge David Perez's court. He was the presiding judge. Ann Eagles was the prosecutor. Henry Hall was the defense attorney, and Markhasev was the defendant. So when it came time presenting the witnesses, these were the witnesses who were going to be called by the prosecution. So let's get started with the first one that was called, and that was Stephanie. Now, true, she could not identify Markhasev as the person there, but she was able to give the sketch, and she was able to explain all the facts of the what happened, the attack, the shooting, and finding Ennis, on the ground next to his car. So she is called as a witness, and the next witness, the key witness to the case, was this Chris. And so the DA investigator, tells him he has to be in court the next day, and they can't find him. He's not at his house. They went out there. He's gone. He's totally taken off, nowhere to be found. Now, without his testimony, the DA is sunk. There's no way they're going to prove that the gun was, tied to Markhasev. The DNA wouldn't be able to be used. They're not going to have a case if they can't get Chris to come to court, and they aren't going to be able to bring him in. He has to be there the next day. What the DA investigator did was interesting, was he did a triangular of the cell phone of Chris, and he was able to find that he was in Orange County in an apartment. And when they went to that apartment, he's hiding. He's hiding in a bedroom. So they find him and they arrest him and they bring him to court the next morning. And this is Judge Perez's court. They bring him in, and he's not happy. He's not happy to be there. And he comes in and he's forced to tell exactly what Markhasev told him about being involved in the killing, the shooting, the attempt robbery of Ennis Cosby. So that evidence came in, just fortunately. And the other witness that was very important was a hostile witness, and he refused to take the witness in. He sat in the witness box, but he wouldn't even give his name. He wouldn't say a word. But the judge said, okay, you can play the tape of this individual. And they did. And the jury was able to hear key information that Markhasev had said to this M. Chan. So that evidence came in, jury heard it, and it was time for argument. As I say, I was working downtown, trying to put everything together for the argument. And Ann Ingalls, she comes down there, and it's on the weekend, and we're preparing her argument that she was going to be using on Monday morning. So we worked and on it, and this was the argument that Ann Ingalls used that Monday morning in front of the jury. She showed where all the evidence pointed to Markhasev, all the evidence. And there was quite a bit of evidence, and that was her argument. Well, the defense had a different argument. They got up and they called it a Saudi. Some other dude did it. And they're saying it's Eli. It's Eli who did it. And it wasn't Markhasev. They've got the wrong person. So that was their argument. But what was interesting in rebuttal, the prosecutor, Ann Ingalls, she used this chart that I made here. I kind of had a feeling they were going to do this, blame it on Eli. And she pointed to it, says, okay, they claim that Eli did it. Where is the evidence? There is no evidence that's been presented, and it was true. Not a word, not a witness. No one had come forth indicating that Eli could have been or would have been involved in it. Well, the jury verdict came in reasonably fast as guilty of murder, and Markhasev was given life without the possibility of parole. So, what was his reaction to being convicted? Well, Markhasev, this is his reaction. This is what he did with the press as he walked out of the jail. Now, I just wanted to go over as to how was this case successful. A lot of work went into it from my staff at the DA's office with Ann Ingalls. Ann Ingalls did a remarkable job, and Gil Garcetti was the DA at the time. Tough case, very, very tough case. And what came out of it was that Markhasev, he took this case up on appeal, and then he abandoned the appeal. And this is what he stated to the appellate court. I am guilty, and I want to do the right thing. I want to apologize to the victim's family. Well, that doesn't happen very often, but it was good news. Now, I just wanted to bring you up to date. The Brentwood family, where the Cosbys lived when they were in Los Angeles, it's still there. It looks exactly the same as it did back in 1997. The other is I wanted to show you, where was, the gun and the nitcap found. It was next to this rock, and it's still, the rock is there. And, well, of course, the nitcap and the gun are not, but it's remarkable. It's right there, and fortunately, that one cadet, spotted it and made the case. Now, as far as where the crime scene occurred on Skirball Center Drive, the payphones are still there. And you think, could this happen again? Could somebody pulling off in that area early in the morning. Could an attempt robbery occur to them? Yes, it could. It is kind of a isolated area. Now, that is the crime scene. That is where Ennis Cosby was shot and died right there. Not much of a memorial. How sad to end his life that way.
There were a lot of twists and turns in the Ennis Cosby Mikhasev case. If you want to know more about all the details as far as the investigation, as well as actually what happened in the courtroom during that long jury trial, get my book, Killers on Mulholland Drive. It features the Markhasev case, but gives all the details, explains everything in it. So get it if you want it. Now, subscribe to this podcast if you want to know when the next one's coming out. Generally, we have a new one every Friday at 3 o'clock. So hopefully you will join us for another True Crimes Files of Los Angeles by Ronald E. Bowers when we analyze another true crime case. See you then.